So, what do you do when someone you love dies? You mourn, you cry, you go to a somber funeral, right? That's the script. But what if I told you about a philosopher from like 2,300 years ago who, when his wife died, started drumming on a pot and singing? It sounds completely heartless, I know, but his bizarre party at a funeral might just hold a really profound lesson for how we deal with loss today.
Okay, let's just dive right into this by starting with something we can all relate to. Funerals, memorials, even just hearing bad news. Let's be honest, they are incredibly awkward. We have this script we're all supposed to follow, but does it ever really match how we feel inside?
And this slide, it just nails that disconnect, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the public performance of grief, the hushed tones, the expected tears, saying the right phrases like, "I'm sorry for your loss." But then on the other side, well, that's our inner world, feeling clumsy, totally unsure what to say, and often feeling this weird pressure to perform sadness in the correct way.
So this tension, between what's expected and what's real, it really begs the question. Are we just locked into this one way of mourning? Or could there be a totally different way to approach one of life's most difficult moments? Well, an ancient story has a pretty wild suggestion. Okay, let's take a trip back in time to ancient China. We're about to meet a Taoist philosopher named Zhuangzi and his good friend, a logician named Huizi. And the scene is, well, it's supposed to be really, really sad.
So Huizi does what any good friend would do, right? He hears the news and he rushes over to Zhuangzi's house to offer his condolences. He's probably picturing the worst, his friend just weeping, inconsolable, completely shattered by the loss of the person he'd shared his entire life with. But that is not what he finds, not even close.
Instead, Huizi walks in and finds Zhuangzi sitting on the floor, banging on an overturned pot like it's a drum, and singing his heart out. And Huizi he's scandalized. He cannot believe the disrespect. As he says, not crying is one thing, but to be drumming and singing? That's outrageous.
Now, it is really easy to side with Huizi here. I mean, Zhuangzi's actions seem shockingly cold. But this wasn't a case of a man who didn't love his wife. No, this was the reaction of a man who had a completely different perspective on what had just happened. He understood something fundamental about the universe that his friend had totally missed. So, how in the world did Zhuangzi justify his pot-banging party? Well, it all comes down to a massive shift in perspective, from thinking about the personal to thinking about the cosmic.
And this is absolutely the crucial point. Zhuangzi explains to his friend that his first reaction was grief. He felt the loss just like anyone else would have. He wasn't some emotionless robot. But then he did what philosophers do. He started to think really deeply about the nature of what had actually just happened.
And this slide breaks down his logic so perfectly. He reasoned that, look, before his wife is born, she didn't exist. She was just part of this vast, formless energy of the universe. Then a natural change happened. It gave her a spirit, then a body, then life. And now, death is simply the next change in that same continuous process. To him, her death was no more tragic than autumn following summer. It was just the natural pattern of things.
This whole idea is central to Taoist thought, and it's captured in this concept of the Tao. Probably the easiest way to think about it is like a great flowing river of the cosmos. Everything, birth, life, death, the changing seasons, it's all just a current within this one massive river. And you don't get angry at the river for flowing, you just accept it.
So for Zhuangzi, wailing and sobbing would have been like a protest against the fundamental laws of nature. It'd be like yelling at the sky because winter has arrived. It would show that he just didn't get how the world works. So his singing, it wasn't disrespectful at all. It was actually a sign of his deep acceptance and understanding.
Okay, so that is a fascinating 2,300-year-old story. But what does a pot-banging philosopher have to do with us today? How can we actually apply this kind of cosmic perspective when we're the ones faced with loss? Well, we can actually build a kind of modern toolkit from this ancient wisdom. First, we can try to reframe loss, not as this terrible final end, but as a natural transformation. We can also let ourselves grieve, of course, but maybe see that grief as a process, like a season, that will also eventually change. And maybe most importantly, we can let go of this idea that there's a right way to mourn. For some people, it's quiet reflection. For others, it might be celebrating a life with stories and laughter. It's about shifting from only mourning and absence to celebrating a presence that was. But here's the thing.
Zhuangzi's perspective on death doesn't just change how we say goodbye. If you really let it sink in, it fundamentally changes how you think about everything else.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. If death isn't a full stop, if it's just another change in an endless cycle of transformations, then what does that make your life right now? It kind of suggests that your life isn't some story with a tragic ending, but a temporary, beautiful state, just one season among many. And if that's true, how differently might you choose to live it?